So, hello everyone, and welcome to my Let's Talk series where I share conversations with those who support families navigate their international life successfully whilst maintaining their languages abroad, which is not as easy as it seems. Now, before we dive into today's topic, if you follow us live today, please share your questions and observations in the comments so that we can answer them live. And if you watch the recording, please leave your comments and questions in the comment section. We'll continue the conversation there. So now today, I'm very happy and very honored to talk with Dr. Inga Hilbig about when bilingual children don't speak the minority language. So please allow me to shortly introduce Inga. She is associate professor at the Department of Lithuanian Studies, Institute of Applied Linguistics at Vilnius University. And her major research interests are the sociolinguistics of early bilingualism, DIS-harmonious bilingualism, family language policy, and cross-cultural communication. Her main research focus currently lies on the emotional well-being of Lithuanian migrant women in situations of disharmonious bilingualism in their inter-ethnic families. So she also gives talks and seminars on children's bilingualism for Lithuanian parents and community schools teachers in diaspora. She is a supporting member of the Harmonious Bilingualism Network, the HabilNet, and a member of the Lithuanian Applied Linguistics Association, Litaka. She has been involved in several national and international scientific projects in sociolinguistic and interdisciplinary, such as MotherNet. Now, we often think that we can create the perfect, whatever this means, environment for children to use several languages from very early on. And when we follow the research and the recommendations and books and guides and see that it doesn't really happen with our children, we start actually doubting and getting really frustrated. Now, you're very welcome, Inga, and I would like to start maybe in medias res and ask you the first question, that is, please share with us about yourself and what made you focus on early and harmonious and non-disharmonious bilingualism.
Hi, Ute. Hi, everyone watching us. Thank you very much for having me here, Ute. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. Yes, well, I am a linguist who was working in the field of linguistic pragmatics long time ago, before I got my bilingual children that came into this world. I was interested in linguistic politeness and impoliteness. And when in our inter-ethnic Lithuanian German family were expecting the first child, our pranas, to come, I was suddenly very much interested in bilingualism, early bilingualism as such. And I was very much determined to now explore this sphere in my daily life, next to raising this small bilingual human being. I had my diary ready, I had my recorder next to me, and I was expecting my pranas to start speaking in 2 languages simultaneously, because what I know at that time, I knew very little at the very beginning, was that okay, if you are an international family, inter-ethnic family, with 2 different native languages that parents speak, you are supposed to use those languages with your child to make them separate, to be consistent, to provide enough of those languages for a child, enough of input, and everything will go swimmingly. Your child will become this ideal bilingual as we imagine it, right? Speaking 2 languages at the same time, at the same level, and so on and so forth. That's how it all started. Me knowing only a little bit, but then this knowledge accumulated because we ran into difficulties. Suddenly, it came like a shock. My child starts to speak, but he spoke only the societal Lithuanian language while we were living in Lithuania. And that was an impulse for me to explore it all further because, well, something was obviously going wrong as I saw it at that time. So that was the start because my child wasn't this textbook example of perfect simultaneous bilingual person, as it seemed at that time.
Yes, exactly. And this is actually what many parents also experience then at some point, that it's not this, manual or example kind of case that we have then the pleasure to raise. And we start doubting, we maybe read everything we can and we educate ourselves. Or if we are linguists or psychologists, we know already what should be done and what would be effectful and efficient for many children or children in several cases, but then it doesn't work for our children like you experienced. And I must say, when I read your article, I was really blown away because it was actually what I also experienced with my child. So in your article, which is Zwei Sprachen gleichzeitig, nein, das schaffe ich nicht, a Lithuanian-German boy's journey to active bilingualism. You describe the language use of your son, let's call him P, from age 0 to 5, who is a simultaneous bilingual, like you just said, and who didn't use the minority language of the places he was growing up in. But can you maybe please illustrate what your son's simultaneous bilingualism looked like in the first 5 years? I know it's a long time and you have dedicated a lot of time and space to it, but maybe in a nutshell, in a big nutshell.
Yeah, in a big nutshell. Okay, I will try. So to cut a long story short, my Pranas was speaking only the societal language of the country we were living in at that moment. We changed countries 2 times. His first 3 years were spent in Lithuania, where he would use Lithuanian not only with me, but also with his German-speaking father. When we moved to Germany, him being nearly 3 years old, there was a switch that happened from German to Lithuanian, a complete switch within 1 month. He changed his active language into German, abandoning Lithuanian, so to say. So what we were having in those first 5 years of his life, because later we came back to Lithuania, and that was when he, when his bilingualism went into fulfillment, if I can put it this way. He started using actively both of his languages. But in his first 5 years of life, he was receptive bilingual, the one who could understand both languages okay, but was using only the one in which the environment outside his bilingual home spoke. Mm-hmm. At that time, I thought it was a failure that we made. It was something went wrong, that he would never ever speak the other minority language. But later it appeared that, well, most probably he was an emergent bilingual, and we just had to have patience with him, because those 2 languages do not necessarily have to evolve at the same pace. And some children can be very good performers in their both or all languages, but some need some more time to be able to learn to switch them in their everyday conversations.
Yes, and I think it's very important what you say, that this perfect simultaneous bilingual is one of a million cases. So every child is very different. You can see some patterns, and you can try to explain what might have caused what kind of reaction or to the languages the child is exposed. But we are always wiser afterwards when we look back. But when we are right in the middle, what you think is, oh, I'm doing everything wrong. What is happening? Is it maybe me? Is it my partner? Is it the environment? Is it the community? Is it the child? Is the child lacking of something? Is there something going on in the development? So there are thousands of questions that pop up, and then you try to tick them off. And then maybe in the end you say, well, and time goes by. Meanwhile, you try to explain them. And then you find out, no, actually, it's just the way it is in our setting, in our situation and the way the child responds, the way we do it, we can adjust it in some way. And this is also something that is important to mention, right? You mentioned before that you were adopting the OPOL method, which is very often called the kind of strategy to please use if you have two different languages in the family, or if you have even 3 or 4, that's another thing, but that you used it. And can you maybe share with us just why this OPOL method did not work and actually rarely does, like also Inga Hilbig mentions in her studies and others since several years actually?
Yeah, OPOL is a very well-known strategy. Everyone knows OPOL. It works sometimes for some families, and it has a very good reputation among people, but that's quite surprising because in very many cases, as you just said, it does not work. And we even have statistical data from the very same Professor Inga Hilbig, which supports it, right? That in those families where which are inter-ethnic families, usually bilingual families, where both parents are able to speak the minority language. And one of those parents, being minority language speaker, also uses minority language at home, and also the children. Those families have actually the least opportunities to raise their children being actively bilingual. The reason being, well, very often it's not enough of linguistic input for children, because this minority speaking parent who speaks the majority language with the other partner, very often it's the case, right? They live in the majority language country, they interact in majority language with each other. And the input for the child in a minority language is just so small usually. Those one-to-one conversations are usually minimum, right? Especially if parents work long hours from home, right? And they do not simply have enough opportunities to stimulate their children enough in minority language. Especially if the family language is majority language, so that everyone understands it at the family table, for example. Yes. So it simply upsets linguistic balance in a family too much, this OPOL, very often. And minority language is in a way underrepresented in child's environment. But even more importantly, children might not see, as was the case of my pranas, an incentive, a reason why to use this underrepresented minority language with a parent that understands the majority language. Why to break your tongue? Why to put effort, especially if it's really difficult, as it was in the case of my son, to switch, right? Why to waste your time? Children are not time, sorry, your effort, your energy. Children are very pragmatic, just like we are. If we don't feel a need to speak a language, we find our ways out of that, right? We switch to the one we know better. So it's the same with many small human beings, I would say. And so this pragmatic communicational need to use the language is very difficult to create in such families. Because, well, you have to deal with a minority language speaker parent who is bilingual. And you know that very well, that your mom, let's say, understands and even speaks German, as was in my case. Really, people need to be very creative when using OPOL to create those opportunities for children to use the minority language.
Yes, exactly. What I have observed in some families who were aware of this shortcoming of the minority language in this OPOL setting, so a minority language that's not shared in the community, and the majority language spoken in the family, that they try to then speak the minority language in the community as a family language. So I think you, at some point, you also try to implement this in your family, so that when you were, was it when you were in Lithuania that you tried to speak German as family language, or the other way around? I don't remember. But that is also something that sometimes parents can try to make work, but in my experience, it doesn't really work that well if it doesn't come spontaneously, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the same for us. When we were still in Lithuania, I wasn't competent enough in German for us to use the other method, which is minority language at home.
Yeah.
My husband, however, was able, and he switched into German when speaking to me at some point. It was our desperate attempt to increase this German input at home so that the child hears more German, but it hasn't brought any results, actually. When we moved to Germany and we saw Lithuanian vanishing from our home, basically, he switched back to Lithuanian when talking to me. He could do that. I'm very thankful for him. But again, it has brought no results.
Yes.
It was just...
And we need to be also very realistic. Not everyone can just switch between the languages that you share with a given person. I remember that also with some friends that I got to meet in a certain language and then discovered that I had another language that I could share with them. It's difficult to switch. I had one little trick to find out or to switch to the language. I wouldn't look them in the eyes, but in between the eyes, but that was not really very nice. Not always.
Yeah, minority language at home is a wonderful strategy, and it is the one that is advocated the most these days, right? But yeah, it's a luxury. It's a luxury because the majority language speaking partner has to be able to at least understand minority language and preferably even speak it. And that's, it's hardly achievable in most cases when family lives somewhere else. In the majority language speaking country.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's difficult. But as you said, it's actually minority language at home, the one strategy that is most successful. And with this regards, I would like to add not only one minority language at home, but it can also be two minority languages at home. And then the majority language in the community or at school, that can be also very successful, but one needs to really be very, very consistent. And the children need to be on the same page, and that is not always the case. I could talk about that, but let's go to the next question that I have, because what were the major factors now that influenced your son's language choice?
Yes, I have analyzed that very closely. It was very interesting for me to find out, so what's the reason? Why didn't we go the way we wanted to go, and what has happened actually in our family? And I even made a chart with all possible parameters in our home and also community environment that could have possibly influenced Prana's linguistic attitudes and behavior in Lithuania and in Germany. And it appeared that most of those parameters, like I will quote a little bit, language spoken by Pranas to the father, language spoken to Pranas by mom, daily time spent at home, daily time spent with mom and his younger sibling Jonas, daily time spent with father, daily time spent in majority language childcare, contacts with minority language pairs. All those parameters, they were left the same when we relocated, when we changed the country. What changed was the kindergarten and community language, and that was crucial, and that was the most powerful thing. The things which were happening in our home seem to be not that influential at all. Although there's this widespread belief that, okay, especially when your children are still small, you can keep your family in a kind of a closed space, and you can do whatever you want. You can create your family language policy in the best way possible. You can control your child's behavior and practices, right? But that wasn't our case at all, right? And the power of community language, especially his peers' language, was the most important parameter, the most important determinant for the switch of the languages. He was a boy who liked very much to go outside and play with other children. He was bored at home. We went outside as much as possible. And he has immediately realized when we went to Germany that, okay, now all children around him speak German. He went to the kindergarten and wow, everyone speaks German. I also need to know German because I want to play with them. I want to associate with them in some way. And when we came back to Lithuania, him speaking only German, right, for 2 years nearly, one of the first phrases he said after his first day in a Lithuanian kindergarten was, wow, they all speak Lithuanian. That really made a huge impression on him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you maybe specify at what age he was very much influenced by his peers? Because sometimes we think, well, the children maybe that are 4 or 5 years old, the influence or the of peers increases. Yes, but it actually happens much earlier, right?
Yeah, that was a very interesting thing, I thought. We really tend to believe that peers start making influence at a bit later age. But my son was 2 years old, right, when he was living in Lithuania and speaking only Lithuanian, because all the children around him were Lithuanian speaking. He was 3 when we went to Germany. And yeah, as I told, he immediately switched into German. He could activate actually, not reactivate, because he hadn't spoken German before, his German in order to be with them, to play with them. So it was 2 and 3, sorry, yeah. He was, okay, so everything was happening until age of 5, right? All those switches, all those changes, that was a very dynamic period that went through. And yes, well, it's not only about teenagers or children who are school age, even 2-year-olds capture that very quickly. What is pragmatic? What is useful? What is needed for me to be able to function in this world? Which languages are useful and which ones are not useful at all in my life?
Yes, because I mean, we know maybe many people know the studies for babies who can react and who have different kind of reactions depending on who is addressing them with what language. They recognize the language of the mother or the languages used by the parents. But actually, the children, sometimes even before they become very fluent in the language, I want to say this in terms of that they can be understood by other adults outside of the household, even then they can have this preference for language, or they can understand the mechanisms, and that mom actually uses language yellow much more outside of home, and everyone is very interesting outside of home, and at home it's a bit more boring. It's only 2 people, maybe there are more in some families, but still it's a different social setting. It's a micro society that is very small and with certain patterns, and then they bring somehow the need that they perceive that is given for the language use outside of home also inside of home. So sometimes we tend to say we start with home and then we go out, but this interplay between outside and inside that happens every day several times, these switches, that is quite something. It's a real workout for everyone, for us adults, but also for our children.
And it can be very strenuous. We underestimate sometimes the effort that children put into their linguistic performances. There's this widespread belief, well, they're just like sponges, you know, it's a piece of cake for them. They can do that very easily, unlike us adults, but it's not always the case. They might need time to accumulate it all until they finally bloom, maybe, in all their languages.
Yes,
and
then
them.
And they need to make the experience also to use that other language by talking about what they played during the day or what they did at the daycare or something like that. Exactly. No. So what do you think do you think that your son didn't value Lithuanian in Germany and German in Lithuania? I mean, this is now a perspective of an adult, right? So you said, didn't you value my language? But it's actually something that I also hear of from many parents who are frustrated, like maybe you were to a certain extent, and I was when my children were resistant. What do you think about this?
Yeah, what I made, what kind of experiences I made with my pranas made me think that, well, young children have really another understanding maybe of what is valuable. And I would say that for them, value is something that is, well, a valuable language is a language that is needed in their daily life. And from this need comes this value of a language. Of course, they're still not, they're not able to feel, to sense all those, linguistic ideologies hanging around in the wider society. They are not able to grasp yet that, Lithuanian in Germany would be, I don't know, some Eastern, Northern European language of maybe economic immigrants, right? So it's not that valuable, it's not prestigious outside the borders of our country. It does not enjoy a high status, but that all comes later when they're a bit more mature and they're able to orient themselves socially already. But for such small individuals, it's all about whether I need it or not, whether it makes sense to speak this language or not. And it really seemed that pranas had a very clear stance and de-evaluated German in Lithuania and Lithuanian in Germany. And we have collected many anecdotes that prove that he would say, for example, to his father, don't speak this language. It is not nice to speak this language. It's very clear attitude, very clear preference for Lithuanian as a majority language.
Yes, so he somehow he captured at an early age the rules, the societal rules of language use. So you are in that setting and you use that language, and he wanted to welcome it at home. Or maybe he heard also your husband speaking Lithuanian, and he said, the same that happened for you when you were in Germany, and he didn't speak that much German, Lithuanian with you. So when this happened, I mean, there was this bilingual discourse that you mentioned in your article that happened for you and also for your husband. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? Because this is one of the triggers for us parents, right? When we realize I keep on speaking my language yellow, my child is responding in language blue all the time. Mm-hmm. And you think, okay, for 1 day, 2 days, 2 months, 3 months, a year, when will this stop? Or is it stopping? What do I need to do in order to make it stop? I mean, there are some strategies. Maybe you can tell more about that.
Yeah, there are some strategies how to socialize your child in answering you in an appropriate language, the one you address him or her. It does not necessarily have to be minority language. Sometimes you might have to use majority language, let's say at the doctor's. But what we would expect from children when we socialize them is that they answer in the right language code to us, the one that we speak to them. But we unfortunately did not know about those strategies when pranas was very small. And I only suspect that we maybe missed this opportunity because, well, the reason is very clear. Even in his 1 word, 2 word phase, when he was able to utter a word, 2 words, a combination of 2 words, he was already in Lithuanian dominant. So we rejoiced over every word that came out of his mouth. He started to speak and we didn't care which language that was. We were applauding his linguistic performance, and we thought that it's not nice and not kind to the child to correct him, right? To expect something else from him, the right code. Yes. So this duolingual discourse was actually really disheartening and discouraging for us. My husband, for example, felt really upset because he wasn't receiving this output. It's a feeling that, well, you put so much into your child, you really bombard him with lots of input, you stimulate him so intensively, you read, you play songs, you let him or her hear stories being told in the minority language. You do so much, there's so much of input and no output at all. And I think what is very important for parents to remember is that the reason, sorry, not the reason, but the fact that there's no output does not necessarily mean that your child is not evolving in the minority language. There are so many things that are going on hidden then in that case. I think that's really a very positive message for children. Professor Jürgen Meisel, in his book called Bilingual Child, talks about that quite a lot to parents.
In the back. Yes. I have it here in the back somewhere.
Yes, well, so it's very important to bear this in mind that, okay, we don't see the output, but the language, well, is there, is evolving in your child's brain.
Yes.
But at that time, we were not aware of that. And both for me and for him, when we were living outside our own countries, it felt so strange. It felt so alienating. Well, you use one language and your child keeps on answering in another. And it felt, in my case, like a big Chinese wall between my child and me, which was not nice at all. It really endangered our well-being as parents. The fact that we were using constantly different languages in our daily life conversations with our children. It felt strange. And when, for a very short moment, we doubted if we should go back to Lithuania from Germany, for me, it was a drama, really. I was so desperate and just frightened by this idea that, okay, so that's the end. We're staying here and my child will never, ever be able to speak Lithuanian.
Yes, I can fully relate to that. I have one child who is also very, very resistant in speaking German. And I had a friend who is, for me, the hero in this, because he persisted for 10 years. I mean, it's not a month, it's not 5 months, but we talked about this, and he was actually also one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I saw how consistency and really not giving up, there were little lights at the end of the tunnel every now and then when they would visit maybe Italy, it was Italian, and the other languages were Dutch, English and Portuguese. But he always said, no, she said something that sounded a bit Italian, and he was grasping these little things. And I also observed she was understanding everything he said. She just would respond in another language. So what made the switch then for her, and she was about 10 years old, was peers during a summer holiday that was a little bit longer than usual. So I know that in your article you say, this can happen for some children, not for all children, because it's sometimes the only possibility that we have if we live abroad, that we spend longer periods of time, but longer periods of time, we don't have that many holiday days if we work. So we can spend maybe 3-4 weeks, not even every year sometimes, in the country where our minoritized language where we live is spoken. So we have to grasp these little moments and hope for the best. But he was really the person that made me understand you have to go ahead, and the receptive kind of bilingualism or multilingualism in her sense, or however you want to call it, is also valuable, and very much, because this little lady, I call her lady, she was able to say full sentences, and actually at the same level as her peers. And who would have thought that?
Yeah.
No, because you think if someone doesn't speak, that they cannot speak if it's necessary. But she could. Just she didn't want to do it with her dad.
Yeah, there's so much of evidence of children actually being able to gather themselves and to activate their dormant languages when having to deal with monolingual minority language speakers. That's when they show their potential, and it's very often that parents are very surprised because they think that their children do not talk in Lithuanian, but yeah, they do with their grandparents when left alone, for example.
When left alone, when the parents are out of the room, out of earsight, so to say, or hearing, they
Not
don't
at
hear.
their service anymore. Parents can't assist them, can't translate. We were very helpful. We're translating quite a lot to our children when being with grandparents. That wasn't good, I think.
Yeah, but you want to make sure that the child understands everything and can communicate, and that there is mutual understanding in the room or around the table or whatever the setting is. So translating is not that bad, and sometimes it's necessary. I mean, we all know our children best, and every child is different. But yes, in the long run, when you say, why did I translate? Actually, it was actually understanding everything that I'm saying. But you also have two boys, right? So I would like to ask you now, because in the family settings with three, it's one kind of dynamic, and then when there is another child and maybe an international move to a community language that changes as well, can maybe trigger some shifts or not. So how did the language use of P, I just say the first letter of your son's names, P influence the language use of J?
Yeah, it was a very large influence that he made. We know that from many studies that all the siblings really influence immensely the speech, the language of their smaller sisters and brothers. Jonas, my second child, was following his brother's developmental path in most regards, only that his situation was exactly opposite in terms of active and passive languages, because he was learning to speak in Germany. And his older brother used to come from the kindergarten, and during the very first days in Germany, when he was already able to produce some German, he decided to speak in German with his sibling, because it's also a child, it belongs to the peer group. So let's speak German to the father and to your brother as well. And of course, well, that made a bigger impression on Jonas than my Lithuanian. I used to spend quite a lot of time with him alone, but that hasn't had any bigger impact. He was starting to speak using German mostly, and just peppering in some Lithuanian words every now and then. And that was it. Yeah. So yeah, and when they came back from Germany to Lithuania, they kept German as their inter-siblings language for almost 1 year, living in Lithuania already. And Pranas was the one who kept an eye that they spoke German. He took a role of a language policeman, I don't know, and he would say, Jonas, wir sprechen Deutsch, we speak German. And that's it. And Jonas would do as his brother does and switch back to German. Yes, well, he did what was expected from him with pleasure, actually.
Yes. So he was, so to say, the language manager of the two siblings. So telling, now we are here, everyone is speaking up, but we keep on speaking German. And that's very interesting to see how this role can be taken over by a little child, right? So sometimes parents say, I'm in charge and I somehow set the rules. But actually, the children's agency is very, very important. And you emphasize it many times also in your article and in your other articles as well. Maybe we can, emphasize this here as well.
Yeah, it will be very important. That's right. It's still underestimated, this child's agency, and very often seen as simply a result of some mistakes done in the family language policy led by parents. But it's not always like that. We all have agency, and small people have their agency as well. And I see it more like, I don't know, a dance maybe at home, that we try to steer the course of our family bilingualism where we want to go, but we also have to adapt to what children do, to their attitudes, their preferences, their agenda, because they might also have agenda. For example, Panos was determined to stick to the majority language in all life situations when living in those two countries. And there was so little that we could do about it. I don't know, we felt helpless, but on the other hand, it all has to do with our attitude that we are the ones who can control things, and all things that can be controlled. But the reality is that not everything is in parents' hands. Of course, we have much of influence and this impact belief, the belief that you can influence the developmental path of your child is very, very important. Of course, all those means that we take. But on the other hand, it's also important what children do and what they think, what they feel is valuable, good, rational to do, and whatnot.
Yes, what is rational and following their pragmatic approach to the whole situation, which is also actually a life skill that we should endorse in our children, so that they will have to make many choices, not only about language, but about so many other things. And if they learn how to make choices and sound choices that are perfectly understandable, actually, if we think about it, so then we can also accept that with many regards. But I wanted to say something else. We were talking before about strategies, because you were just mentioning, yes, we parents, we think we can say where we are heading and what we would like to be the outcome, but our children need to play with us. They need to dance with us along the way. I like this picture of the dance, because it gives both a little bit the power every now and then you sit back, you let yourself guide by the other, and then you take over again if necessary. So I like this kind of picture of the dance. I need to remember that. But you were saying also before that there are these strategies when parents try to direct their children to speak the minority language or to speak the other language. And there are some that I would like to highlight now, because I had it just in one conversation with a parent who was saying, yes, but I try to ignore what my child is saying in order to make my child say. And they did misinterpret the rules, or let's say the strategies that are highlighted and explained by Elizabeth Lanza, Janice Nakamura, and Anik De Hauer and others. And I would like to emphasize what needs to be done instead. So in order to invite the child to speak the language, or to let the child decide when they want to switch the language.
I think we have to be firm, but we have to be very careful, very sensitive when we try to apply those strategies, because our final end goal is not to produce an actively bilingual individual, but to nourish our relationship and not to spoil child's future by endangering his or her well-being. So yeah, those strategies are not, I don't know, maybe cut in stone, and they are not supposed to be applied very, very strictly and not minding the child and his or her interests. We have to be flexible with them. The main idea beyond these strategies is to make it so that child stays in the same language as we speak to him or her, in the same conversation, in the same discourse. So we might, how is this called, feign misunderstanding, like Professor De Hauer put it. It's something very natural. Sometimes we mishear also when we speak with the adults. Sorry, what did you say? So it's not, I don't understand you, and until you use the correct language, you won't get your cookies or anything, right? But it's sorry, what did you say? And in ideal case, a child would switch back to our language, right? Yes. Or if we see that a child struggles, if a word is missing, a phrase is missing, and they really can't get to them in their minds, their heads, we can help them by maybe translating or triggering a little bit, just putting some words or phrases into the mouth, and then again expecting that will help to get back to the right track and continue use minority language with us.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And please never, ever, ever ignore what the child is saying, no matter what kind of language they are saying it. That is affecting not only the language use, but so many other things around the child and around our relationship with the child. I wanted you to highlight this. Thank you very much for having done it. And for also the example of like, oh, what are you saying? This happens to me as well. When I speak with some adult in one language and they switch to another one, and I'm still in the language yellow mode and they speak language blue, I need a moment. I'm a bit startled, right? I'm not confused. I'm startled and say, wait, I need to switch now my brain or my hearing in order to follow the rest of the conversation. So this is also what can help our children or to understand, oh, we are talking in Lithuanian and you're talking in German, or maybe then at some point in English or whatever, and you want them to come back to Lithuanian because that was the setting of our conversation. And sometimes it takes maybe 1 turn, 2 turns, 3, 5. With one of my daughters, it went from 7 turns up down to 3 turns, and I'm happy with 3 turns.
So much patience is needed, right? So much of determination. If we're the ones who can stick to one language and stay in it it's easier for us. But some people really are more inclined into, okay, I will go with the flow. I will take the direction that my child is leading me to. So I think that example of your friend who was so persistent and kept on speaking for 10 long years, the language that his children wouldn't speak to him or her, right, is impressive. And well, in case we do everything that is possible, but we still don't get this monolingual discourse, well, I think to continue speaking nevertheless is so important, so crucial in order to keep those receptive bilingual skills in our children. And who knows, that might be activated provided there are favorable circumstances sooner or later in their life. Because it's a journey. It's such a long journey. It's not about a short period of time. It's a lifelong thing, this bilingualism in us.
Yeah, I must say, well, it wasn't all, he wasn't very calm during these 10 years. You can imagine that it was really a roller coaster ride. And many times he said, I give up, I just can't anymore, because you feel like always bumping against the wall. But then there were periods, as I said, where there was some light, and these were the ones that he tried to focus on. And I had a similar situation, so sometimes we could talk about this and say, "Oh, come on, this week was a fine one, and let's focus on something else this week or this month because they are busy with other things. So let's talk about this next month or maybe in 2 or 3 months." And so in the end, time goes by, and they actually build this receptive bilingualism, which leads me to our next question, which would be what makes receptive bilingualism that is very often considered by parents like a failure or something like that. I have heard so many parents say, "Oh, I'm failing because my child is not responding in my language." What makes actually receptive bilingualism a valuable asset that is worth maintaining? I would like to focus on this.
It's so valuable indeed. It's a treasure. It's a sign for us parents that we managed, that we made it. We succeeded to provide enough of linguistic input for our children. We put very much of effort into that, and we succeeded. Children are able to understand. Very often parents think and say, for example, my child only understands, but does not speak, as if it was nothing, as if receptive skills were, it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. And there are so many bilingual individuals in this world who only know a little bit of this minority language of theirs. Maybe are able to understand something and then suddenly not. Maybe their minority language is just as I call it, no, it's not from me, but from, I guess, Aneta Pavlenko, this kitchen Russian, how she called it. So just about everyday life, about milk and homework and so on. So it's a very big deal. It's a very big achievement that your child is able to understand the minority language. And you can really praise yourself. You can pat on your shoulders. You can pat each other as parents, because it's a big achievement. And by no means a failure or a lost cause. And also it has potential to be activated, this receptive bilingualism. Who knows what happens? You change countries, your child grows up and meets a partner, gets a partner from that other, or that minority language country, decides to study, to live there, or maybe just gets an interest to dive into this minority language and takes a course somewhere. So we can never know. And yes, once again, to understand is already much. Receptive bilingualism does not come easily as well. To understand is already a very sophisticated process that is going on in our minds, and we have to appreciate that.
Yes, and I would like to add another aspect of receptive bilingualism, because we often think about it related with maybe young children or school-aged children, and that they don't read the language. Actually, it can also be that they are receptive bilinguals that are able to understand the spoken language and also are able to read and sometimes even write. So I had a discussion lately with someone who said, well, my child can write very well in that language, but when she speaks, she makes so many errors, so many mistakes and short sentences. But when you see what she's writing, longer sentences than when she speaks. So that was a very interesting thing that I'm still racking my mind about. But this is also a constellation that is possible, that
Sure.
a child is able to read, maybe not out loud because they don't want to, or maybe not with us, with someone else. And even they can even be able to write something, a little card or a message, a short message in that kind of language without us knowing. So it's good to observe very close and to, as you said, never give up, and don't think that only because someone is not able to speak that they are not able to understand. Never underestimate the other person.
Yeah. And we should be more cautious and spot those moments of small successes when children produce something in the minority language. Because, well, as we know from the research of Janice Nakamura, well, this receptive bilingualism does not mean always zero production. Still, children are able to produce some things, only that we do not notice. They might be not original utterances, just imitating us, reacting to what we say. Hast du Hunger? Hunger. Are you hungry? Hungry. Or something like this. But still, it's output, right? And we have to applaud that. We have to celebrate that. And success builds on success. And then we can move further and celebrate our bilingual lives with children this way more.
Yes, exactly. And also success is not the success that is written in books or that is like shown in, I don't know, shows online or on television, but it's a success that we can see with our children when they have a certain development, when we see that they are making some steps. That's already success. And we all define it in our very own way. So I think that is also very important to emphasize that our personal or individual successes are as worth as every other one. So that's something important to remember. Now, you wrote this article a while ago, but now your children are older. Fast forward almost 10 years when you started your studies or when you started recording your data. How do your sons now use their languages today?
Yeah, at some time, I think it was a year after we came back from Germany, our children being 6 and 4 years old, we could finally lay back and enjoy it all with no worries at all. I wish as many parents as possible reach this phase and have this feeling and this wonderful bliss that comes to you. Because, well, those most sensitive, most dynamic years of their bilingual development were over. And this bilingualism seemed to be stabilized by the time they were of school age, both of them. Now they are dominant in Lithuanian, of course. They use Lithuanian as inter-sibling language. But they are both also competent and fluent speakers of German. Yes, well, for their age. And they can not only talk about their daily life activities in German with their father, but they can really talk about the world and what is happening there. Because, well, they have really quite sophisticated conversations with their dad about what is happening. And also they watch films, they watch educational German programs for children, children's news, Logo Nachrichten,
Yes.
for example. So they are really equipped with this language that usually people, small people, children lack because they are schooled in another language, and this language really gets very sophisticated, and they can speak about climate change or astronomy in that language. I think they're quite balanced. Well, in my eyes, what I see as balanced bilingualism, which is not some ideal phase, but I think they're balanced. They can do what they want to do in both their languages. They go to their grandparents, they have no difficulties to communicate with them. They taught themselves to read in German. I thought that was a very nice example of how this literacy can be transferred from one language to another. They struggled a lot when learning to read in Lithuanian. Really, that was a challenge, especially with Jonas. But then they taught themselves by reading comics, Asterix and Obelix, Donald Duck, and slowly they could also move to more difficult books, longer texts without any pictures in them. And we celebrate that now, and it was like a miracle for him. We haven't done anything at all. We just provided them with enough of books. We wouldn't take Lithuanian books when going to a holiday in Germany. So they were put into a situation where they only could read in German. Yes. And that helped a lot as well. So we're very happy. I'm very happy that what seemed to be a failure in the very beginning turned out to be, well, yeah, a story with a happy end, if we can speak about an end at all, because they're still very young and who knows what's going to happen later. But, well, we can be sure that this bilingualism is, well, it's solid, right? No one can take them from them anymore. Yes. So that it vanishes completely.
No.
It's not possible.
Yeah, so you have laid the ground foundation of something that a building that they now have to build themselves somehow. Mm-hmm. I would like to thank you very much for everyone who's following us live, and I would like to mention the question from Yoshito from Library for Multilinguals that is so interesting. I think this was about when we talked about the language that your two sons talk to each other. I guess the age of the younger sibling counts. So depending if they are almost the same age, it can be different than if the older child is maybe 3, 4, 5 years older than the younger. I guess this is what you mean, Yoshito. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure this matters a lot. And
yeah, thank you, Yoshito, for mentioning that. It's really important. That was also my thought. They were 2 years apart from each other.
Okay.
They were very close and really loved to play, and they wouldn't fight too much, which was, yeah, also a very nice thing for their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but I think that there are studies also of children who are 1 year or 2 years very, very close together as well in age, where then the second one is the more chatty one and the one then dictating which language is used. So it really pretty much depends maybe on age and on the character of the child, the way they are communicating and the settings and everything. But there is a nice study, or let's say the book, it's also behind me here somewhere, from Susan Baron Howard, about the siblings, bilingual siblings, or the language among siblings. That can be interesting for that if someone is interested. And as we have still Yoshito here on the screen, and you were mentioning graphic novels, or let's say comics, and he is publishing now graphic novels for children around age 8 to 12-ish, 13, I would say, also a little bit older maybe, that is really focusing on the minority language, so that they can discover their minority language and actually apply it in the book. But this is something else. I personally also pretty much learned much of my Italian, even if I was in Italy, growing up in Italy, from I Topolino, from the comics books, because they were quick to read. You have different sceneries. You can read the pictures like in real life. You read the gestures, the intonation, and everything from a person who speaks with you. So I pretty much like those kind of resources more than videos, because that seems like you're just receiving, but you're not trying to follow with your way of observing the picture and focusing on certain things. So thank you very much. So I would like you to now share with us what is next. You mentioned something with the Lithuanian diaspora, and I know that you are working on this. And I would like also to emphasize that this kind of situation, we were talking about Lithuanian, we were talking about German and Mycens, and with Italian or Portuguese, there are so many family constellations or multilingual family constellations where minority languages are really even more minoritized by the community where we live. With this, I mean that the children don't even receive any kind of, or cannot have classes, after school classes, that their languages are not recognized at school, they are not valorized at school, they are not valued at school. That is really a problem, and that shouldn't be, because every language or dialect, we also have a dialect in our home as one of our home languages, is valuable as long as it is important for you, and our children know this. So would you like to share a little bit more about the work that you're doing with the Lithuanian community?
Yes, so our struggles in the very beginning with bilingualism in our home brought me to this sphere of bilingualism, first of all, but then I also had it very, it was really appealing for me to maybe help the others to know the things that I didn't know, but I would have loved to know when I started on this journey. And also those emotional things that are going in us that are really under, how would I put it? They are not taken into account that much. We don't read too much about what is going in us emotionally in bilingual parents' books, for example. Or also, there are not that many scientific studies yet. This concept of harmonious bilingualism is just emerging and being developed. So I really felt sympathy for the other people who are struggling, and I thought I need to go and spread the news, ruin the myth, and somehow facilitate their lives and encourage them, first of all, because there's so many people who are doing the right things, what they're supposed to do, but they are not sure. They get discouraged. There's so many things happening around, and so many comments and maybe false recommendations that people get, which leaves them perplexed and sure. Yes, so my intention was, first of all, to support such people. And that's how it all started. I was being invited to speak to community, schools, parents and teachers. That all has started during the times of pandemic, which opened us all those possibilities to meet people online. Yes. And I feel very privileged to be able to do that, because when we work in the sphere of family language policy and early bilingualism, we are constantly reminded and remind ourselves that we need to go to the society, that we need to bring those results into the world, and for families in real life situations, that we're not doing science just for science sake. Yeah. It has very practical implications for people's lives, and we have to give them back what we get for them. For example, I made so much of research interviewing people, right? And I bring that back to them. That's in a form of results.
Yeah, yes. That's amazing. Thank you very much. And I think much more work needs to be done. So if everyone is encouraged now or motivated to do the same for their language and for their settings, I'm sure that they can maybe find out more through what you have written and what you are doing, what your research is at the moment. So please reach out to Inga if you have any questions, maybe one at a time, not all together. So can be overwhelming. We were talking about overwhelming the whole time, but I found it really very motivating. And thank you very much for taking the time to talk about this important topic, Inga, today. And for everyone who is watching the recording, please keep on asking your questions or share your experiences in the comments on YouTube, and we will get back to you. I always have a look at that, what is going on YouTube. And if there are any questions for Inga, I will pass them on to her so she can respond, and help you out with this. Thank you very much for joining us today. I wish everyone a very nice rest of the day and weekend ahead. And tot de volgende keer, bis zum nächsten Mal. How do you say this in Lithuanian, Inga?
Thank you very much. Sorry.
Bis zum nächsten Mal.
English has ačiū is thank you. Iki pasimatymo. See you next time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.